FELIX PAPPALARDI is best known for his work as the bassist and co-lead vocalist for the band Mountain. The band's song Mississippi Queen reached number 21 on the Billboard Hot 100 chart and has become a classic rock staple. After he admitted to having an affair, his wife, the songwriter Gail Collins, shot him in their apartment in 1983 using a Derringer that he had given to her as a gift. A renowned figure in the Austin music scene, singer-songwriter Blaze Foley was the focus of the movie Blaze, which was released in 2018 and directed by Ethan Hawke. Blaze was also the inspiration for the title character in the song Drunken Angel, performed by Lucinda Williams. Sadly, Blaze was shot February 1, 1989, by the son of a close friend after he'd accused the young man of stealing his father's welfare payments and veteran pension checks. Peter Tosh was a Jamaican reggae musician, and he was one of the main members of the band The Wailers, along with Bob Marley and Bunny Wailer. On September 11, 1987, just after Tosh had returned to his home in Jamaica, a three-man gang came to his house on motorcycles demanding money. Tosh replied that he didn't have any with him, but the gang wasn't convinced. The men tortured him and several of his friends and acquaintances who had come by the house and were also taken captive. After some time, and the bikers not believing their story, they opened fire, taking the life of Tosh and two of his buddies. Bashar Baraka Jackson, known professionally as Pop Smoke, was a star on the rise. He rose to fame with the release of his breakout singles Welcome to the Party and Dior in 2019. Just 12 days after his early 2020 mixtape Meet the Woo 2 debuted at number 7 on the Billboard charts, Jackson was murdered February 19, 2020 in a home invasion in Hollywood at a residence rented from Teddy Mellencamp, a star of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills and the daughter of musician John Mellencamp. Considered one of the most influential soul artists of all time, Sam Cooke is commonly referred to as the King of Soul for his distinctive vocals. On December 11, 1964, Cooke was a victim of a shooting at the Hacienda Motel, which was located in south central Los Angeles, California, at the intersection of 91st and South Figueroa Street. Cooke passed away as a result of his injuries. The body of Cooke was discovered by the police as they responded to claims of a shooting at the motel. It was later established that the bullet had struck him in the chest and pierced his heart. The manager of the motel, Bertha Franklin, claimed that she had fired the shot in self-defense. Her story was instantly called into question by Cooke's friends and acquaintances, and a singing icon was gone at the age of 33. Clarence Smith was an American blues guitarist who was better known by his stage name Pinetop Smith. His hit tune was Pinetop's Boogie Woogie. The song was also the first time that the word boogie woogie was used on a record. He was shot at the age of 24 in Chicago during a dance hall fight the night before a scheduled recording session. It is uncertain whether he was the intended victim or just an unlucky bystander. Darrell Banks was a talented R&B singer from Detroit. His song Open the Door to Your Heart was a hit in 1966. He was shot by an off-duty police officer who was seeing Banks' girlfriend. Banks walked up to the couple near the woman's house, grabbed her by the arm, and said he wanted to talk. When the officer said no, Banks pulled out a gun. The cop pulled out his own gun and shot Banks. King Curtis, even if you hadn't heard his name, you were familiar with his music. Curtis was also a well-known jazz guitarist, and his unique sound was used in hits like Yakety Yak, Charlie Brown, and Respect. In August 1971, Curtis was trying to bring an air conditioner into his apartment, but a guy named Juan Montañez wouldn't move out of the way. After the two started fighting, Montañez stabbed Curtis. Curtis was taken to Roosevelt Hospital but would not survive his injuries. Selena Quintanilla Perez, who was known officially by just her first name, was a superstar of Tejano music, which is a mix of Mexican and European Texan influences. She was also the first Latin artist to have an album reach number 1 on the Billboard chart. Selena was murdered March 31, 1995, by a woman she had hired to run her fan club and shops. The woman shot Selena after her family showed her proof that she had stolen money from both businesses. She was only 23 years old. John Lennon was an English singer, songwriter, musician, and peace activist. He became famous all over the world as one of the Beatles' founders, co-writers, co-lead singers, and rhythm guitarists. He was shot outside the Dakota, an old apartment building in Manhattan where he and his wife, Yoko Ono, lived. Mark David Chapman, a crazy nutjob, was the shooter. Earlier that same night, he had signed a copy of his record Double Fantasy for Chapman. Dimebag Darrell was the stage name most people knew Darrell Abbott by. He was an American musician and was the guitarist for heavy metal bands Pantera and Damage Plan, which he and his brother Vinnie Paul both co-founded. Many people think he is one of the best heavy metal guitarists who ever lived. He was shot on stage at a club in Columbus, Ohio, by a fan with a semi-automatic gun. Before a police officer shot the attacker, he also murdered a security guard, another fan, and a club employee. Brian Harvey was an American musician, best known for being the lead singer of the band House of Freaks. He first became known for his amazing guitar playing in the early 1980s. Harvey was murdered, along with his wife and two young daughters, during the so-called Richmond Spree murders of 2006, which took place in Richmond, Virginia. There were 7 homicides tied to home invasions perpetrated by an uncle and nephew team. Donald MYRICK was an American saxophonist, a member of the Phoenix Horns at the time of his passing, but he was best known for his work with Earth, Wind and Fire and Phil Collins. MYRICK was shot in Los Angeles, California by a Santa Monica police officer who was attempting to serve a search warrant. Police officer Gary Barbaro mistook a butane lighter in MYRICK's hand for a weapon. He fired a single bullet that hit MYRICK in the chest. He died in the hospital shortly afterward. He was 53 years old. Valentin Elizalde was a young star of a Latin music style music called regional Mexican. He was known for his songs about drug bosses called narco corridos, but not all of the people in these songs were fans of his music. Elizalde, his driver, and his assistant were shot after he performed in the Mexican state of Tamaulipas. This may have happened because one of his songs offended members of the feared drug cartel Los Zetas. CHRISTINA GRIMMIE was known for her cover versions of pop songs on YouTube, where she accumulated more than 2 million subscribers. She has put out an EP and an album of her own music and performed and placed in 3rd on The Voice. After a show in Orlando, a fan came up to her while she was signing pictures and shot her 4 times. Later, police said that the fan, who took his own life at the scene, had shown an unhealthy and unrealistic infatuation with the singer. The artist-born José Ricardo Onfroy was often in trouble with the law. His rap songs were influenced by emo and grunge, and he said Kurt Cobain was his biggest inspiration. As he left a motorcycle shop in Deerfield Beach, Florida, he was shot by 2 guys who walked up to his car, reached in, took a Louis Vuitton bag with $50,000 in it, shot at him, and ran away. Ermias Joseph Asghedom, who went by the stage name Nipsey Hussle, was known not only for his music, 2 of his songs won Grammys after he died, but also for his social activism and business projects, such as his Vector 90 co-working space and Marathon clothing store. A man shot the rapper several times outside of his clothing store. Some sources said that the murder was connected to a gang, but others said it was a personal matter. Lee Morgan was one of the brightest stars of hard bop jazz in the late 1950s and early 1960s. His common-law wife, in a jealous rage, shot him in the dressing room of a club where he was playing. He might have survived, but the city was in the middle of a big winter, and it took so long for the ambulance to get there that Morgan died of blood loss. Eddie Jefferson was a jazz singer who created a new style called vocalese by putting words to jazz solos. He was shot as he left a jazz club in Detroit with a member of his band. Police charged a factory worker who was out of work and had been fired by Jefferson. He was charged with the murder but was found not guilty. Marvin Gaye was one of the most popular and successful Motown acts, with hits like I Heard It Through the Grapevine, What's Going On, and Let's Get It On. Gaye's father, Marvin Gaye Sr., shot him the night before his 45th birthday at the family home in Los Angeles. Marvin is said to have intervened in a fight between his parents. JACO Pastorius was a great electric bassist who changed the game with Joni Mitchell and the fusion jazz group Weather Report. He got into the habit of starting fights in bars and seemed to enjoy it. One night in Florida, he was said to have kicked in the front door of a club, who said they were over capacity and wouldn't allow him in. Some reports say the bouncer, who was also an expert in martial arts, stopped him. In doing so, he hurt him badly and put him into a coma from which he never woke up. Tupac Shakur is one of the most successful recording artists in history. He was a rapper and promising actor who gained an almost mythical status after he passed. Shakur was slain in a drive-by shooting in Las Vegas. He was embroiled in a hip-hop feud that pitted musicians and labels from the East Coast and the West Coast against each other. His shooter has never been found. Christopher Wallace, better known by his stage name as Biggie Smalls, was a big figure in the world of hip-hop. In 1995, Billboard magazine voted him Rapper of the Year. Although they had been friends in the past, he and Tupac Shakur were fighting in the mid-90s as part of a hip-hop rivalry between the East Coast and the West Coast. It was speculated for a short time that Wallace was involved in the assassination of Tupac. However, 6 months after Shakur was murdered, Wallace was also gunned down in a drive-by shooting in the city of Los Angeles. Winston Riley was a musician from Jamaica who was known for his singing, songwriting, and record producing. According to the Jamaica Gleaner, he was one of the most successful producers in the history of reggae. His recording studio was destroyed in a fire, and over the next year and a half, he was the target of multiple assaults for reasons that are unknown. He survived both a stab wound and a bullet wound, but on the 1st of November 2011, Winston was shot at his home in Kingston. After being in a coma since the shooting, he died on the 19th of January 2012. Sonny Boy Williamson was an American blues harmonica player, singer, and songwriter. He is often regarded as the pioneer of the blues harp as a solo instrument, and he was one of the most recorded blues musicians of the 1930s and 1940s. Williamson was mugged and shot on Chicago's South Side as he walked home from a performance at the Plantation Club at 31st Street and Giles Avenue, a tavern just a block and a half from his home.